Today's the 23rd day of February in 2024. February is slowly drawing to a close. It's always nice to see February get toward the end because we know that spring is coming, not immediately, but at least is on its way. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a volunteer with Chapter 49 dealing with communication issues. Largely this podcast, but a few other things as well. We appreciate the fact you've chosen to join us today. Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana, and we welcome our chapter president, Duncan Giles. Welcome back, Duncan.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
So we have something I want to talk about at the beginning. We're again recording this on the afternoon of Friday, the 23rd day of February. The day before, people woke up and found out that their cell phones weren't working. And AT&T appeared to be the main culprit. I think Verizon customers, a few other companies had this outage, but AT&T appeared to be the company that's really having the problem. So what I found interesting is I was watching all the news channels and sources, and they were all, it's interesting how AT&T wasn't ready to make an official statement, but they talked on background, no name attributed, to a lot of main reporters saying, hey, this was not terrorism. So at least they wanted that out. So we had to wait actually until the next day, which is today, for AT&T to announce what happened. And apparently it's like a 12-hour outage for some people. It was in and out for some. Not everybody had an outage, and some who had it less time than this, but it could be up to a 12-hour outage for some people with their access to the internet, mostly cell service. Their explanation was a coding error. Coding error. I don't know about you, Duncan, but here's AT&T, one of the backbones of our whole infrastructure for technology in America. And AT&T has big contracts with the government, right?
Absolutely. Very big.
If AT&T had gone down, would we have toll-free service? Would we be able to make phone calls within our governmental system? I mean, that's what worries me. And if it was a coding error by the government, okay, but this was a coding error by the private company we all depend on.
It just shows that, people, including companies, according to Mitt Romney, companies are people, my friend, that it's humans. You've got humans doing it. And according to AT&T, this was human error when somebody was supposed to put in a set of ones and put in zeros or whatever happened.
Yeah, it's interesting. Those ones and zeros I learned in the 1960s in a data processing class are still around. That's still how you code. Isn't that something? So at least everybody was up later on in the day. It happened in the middle of the night, Eastern time, and then people began to get back online and get their access later. But it just, yeah, you're right, Duncan. It does show human error can happen anywhere. It can happen in government. It can certainly happen in the private sector. But I think AT&T and these other companies are going to be scrutinized by the Federal Communications Commission to make sure they have backup. I mean, it's one thing if there's an error, but, do we have a backup system? I think those are the kind of questions that the FCC will ask quite correctly. And by the way, just in case you don't know, NTEU does represent the employees of the Federal Communications Commission, just in case you didn't know that already. Well, let's start off this podcast as we do with many podcasts ever since we started this. It's almost been 4 years, Duncan. Not quite, but almost 4 years we've been doing this podcast, and people said it couldn't be done. We couldn't last, 3 months. We didn't know if we could last one episode. Here we are. We're still around. But I would have to say a majority of the top stories we have had on this podcast are related to budgets, potential government shutdowns, how Congress is dealing with budgets. We have a lot to say on the budget today. So the budget update that we have for you today deals with a couple of different things. One, just where the budget is. And of course, Congress is not in session, but they are. It's interesting how the Republican Party, for example, has had some kind of an outing, off away from Capitol Hill, and I'm sure the Democrats are doing something like it too. They're even though they're in a 2-week recess, they do still have meetings kind of away from government. So uh, they are talking about the budget and what will happen if the budget isn't passed fairly soon. So tell us what you know. There have been a few developments. Tell us what you know as things stand right now.
Yeah, as of right now, and again, we're talking about the first set of agencies are set to go on March 1st, and the majority of agencies are set to run out of funding on March the 8th. So we have a very limited time frame. I'm extremely glad that Congress was able to take a long President's Day break and go on a nice weekend retreat to have discussions about this. Oh, wait, they didn't really have discussions about this. Nothing is moving forward. Right now, the staffers are supposedly talking. Congress comes back I know the House comes back on the 28th. I think the Senate may come back a day or so before that, but it gives a very short time frame to do anything. I saw a comment from somebody from the House saying that they were blaming the Senate for not moving forward with the appropriations, and I was like, I'm in the twilight zone. Isn't the House supposed to be the one moving the appropriations bills to the Senate so the Senate can take them up? It's just a unfortunate. It's fascinating, but it's like watching a train wreck over and over again on this. They are going to have to pass another continuing resolution. There's no way that they would be able to pass budget bills in a timely fashion before March 8th. I just don't see any way to do that. Can they pass continuing resolution? Yes. Now, will they? That's the $64,000 question. The Speaker of the House has said he doesn't want any more continuing resolutions. I don't know how you solve the problem without doing that right now.
Well, Axios, which is one of those news organizations that's been around for just a few years now, but has a very good set of reporters in Washington, they posted a story recently, a couple of different stories. One said that the inside people in the House Republican caucus are saying there will be a government shutdown, but it will be a short one. That's what they told us in 2018. It was 35 days. In fact, well, that was a mess in a lot of different ways. But there was a story posted really just a few minutes before we came on to this podcast to record. And now there's a segment of the Republican Party, which has a slim majority in the House, which says we're not going to vote for this if it has this, or doesn't have this in it. Well, because that margin is so small for the Republicans, it's going to be very difficult for them to pass anything without some Democratic votes. And the Democrats say, if you pay attention to this small minority within your caucus, we're not going to go along. So what I see is the potential for a train wreck. I hope not. But, we want, and I think there are people in the Congress that want a budget.
Yeah.
Some for very good reasons, other just because they know it's going to be politically damaging to them. They don't pass it.
Right.
Because this is an election year and people are going to remember this and be fresh in their minds. So I think we have to keep an eye on this, Duncan, just as you and I try to do, look at the various news sources. But I think, we've been surprised. We've had predictions from people in our national office. Dan Casper was one, admitted he was wrong. He thought there'd be a government shutdown months ago, and they come to a last minute deal. I don't know if that'll happen now. I mean, the speaker said he wanted no more CRs before he passed the last one. So we really don't know how credible that is. We just have to see how the solution comes up. And the only positive thing is that there are very smart staff members of both parties who are talking to each other about potential solutions. Maybe there's something out there we don't know about. I think that's the most positive thing I can take away from this.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and there is, lurking in the background that penalty that if they don't pass all the appropriation bills by April 30th, that there's going to be a 1% cut to all government agencies. Now, the fascinating thing about this, and it's not very widely reported, you have to really dig to find this, and this was part of the debt ceiling deal that former Speaker McCarthy signed off on, is if the Defense Department would take quite a bit of a hit if they had a 1% cut. Discretionary funds, which is where things like the IRS funding and other government agencies come from, actually they would come out okay because it would be a 1% cut from the proposed budget, not from the former actual budget. So they might end up being the same or possibly a little bit more money. So it's really interesting. And you have an awful lot of folks in Congress who are called hawks that are very much into making sure that our national defense is properly funded, and rightly so. And they're going to want to pass a budget well before this April 30th deadline. So the Department of Defense doesn't have this 1% cut. So there's sticks, carrots and sticks are out there to get a deal done.
I'm sorry, Doug. I just want to say one thing. As a guy who made his living as a journalist years ago and still is a volunteer journalist in my local community, what I found interesting, and you passed this along to me the other day, is that all of that explanation about how this works, this 1% cut works, did not come from the Washington Post. It did not come from the New York Times or Politico or Axios or any of the Hill or any of these sources that we tend to rely on that have large Washington reporting staffs. It came from a small newspaper or news organization in Missouri, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, the way that they laid everything out in very understandable terms and how everything works was great. And you can't really find that hardly in anything else. And again, that goes to a general for me, and I'm sure for you, local journalism is not what it needs to be or has been for years, because you would get those in-depth kind of stories, which you don't see anymore. And I'm very grateful that they spelled this out the way they did.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on this. We'll move on, but it's a critical issue, and this podcast and our Facebook page will continue to cover this. And again, well, I'll plug the Facebook page. Go on to Facebook, just search under NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana, that exact phrase. You can like or follow our Facebook page. We try to keep any pressing news up to date there. Here's a term that we've been hearing for a while: phased retirement. Now, I was telling you before we started recording, I spent 6 years as a manager, my final 6 years at IRS. And I had one particular employee who wanted to work part-time, wanted to ease into retirement. And I tried to explain to her, I said, look, you can do that, but you take a huge hit on your retirement. Go to one of, I think we call them best specialists. I don't know what you call them now. But some of the experts, get a ticket and talk to somebody, and you'll see the penalty you'll pay. She did, and that next day, after getting that explanation, she said, I am retiring altogether in a few weeks. It just was not something that was beneficial to the employee. But you're penalized if you wanted to work part-time before you retire. So a lot of expertise is walking out the door that could be used to mentor or just help keep the agency going as you slowly move out of retirement. It's kind of a cliff. It's you either are or aren't. But so there was an effort to put a phased retirement program together. To put it bluntly, it didn't work, and it's because it was not employee friendly. So we do have a new MOU. We have an agreement, if you will, between IRS and NTEU to try to make this program more employee friendly. I want to just read a quick paragraph from a message that Doreen Greenwald sent out to chapter presidents about phased retirement. The MOU contains significant changes to the program, that NTEU sought and obtained. A major issue with the initial phased retirement MOU, and it goes back about 4 years, is that very few employees participated, even though there's a need for those with institutional knowledge to mentor newly hired employees. As such, it was a major goal of our team at NTEU to modify certain provisions so employees who participated would have more flexibility. In the original phased MOU, employees could only volunteer for the program if they agreed to dedicate 100% of their schedule to mentoring. In this agreement, employees will be able to dedicate a minimum of 20%, but up to 100% of their phased retirement schedule to mentoring. So you can do other things other than mentor. Duncan, this is a very positive development.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that phased retirement was a great idea, great concept. They brought it out. Employees didn't like it because, again, it was like 100%. You're doing this. That's all you're doing. A lot of managers didn't like it because it's like, well, I don't want to lose them from doing their field work or phone work or, casework, whatever it is that their particular specialty is. So there was an awful lot of resistance to this. And we've been working on this. National NTU has been working on this for a while. And the chapter presidents that were on this team and our director of negotiations, Ken Moffitt, and the other national NTU negotiators came up and, did what looks to be a pretty solid plan now that will give employees more options, as you said, to do this anywhere from 20 to 100%. And it'll make it something more viable for people that, okay, I want to help the organization, but I'm getting tired of going into the field all the time. I'm, answering the calls all the time. How can I help the organization and give my knowledge and spread that somehow and be able to do these things without, totally doing it all the time? And I think this is going to accomplish it. Now, right now we're waiting. It has to, we've come to an agreement, and in any of these memorandums of understandings, MOUs, we have to wait until it's called agency head approval. They have to go all the way up to make sure that everything that we agreed to is legal and is acceptable to them. And then either when we get agency head approval or 30 days, then we can start rolling it out. And so hopefully by mid-March, we'll be able to see this advertised on things like USA Jobs for people to be able to apply for this, to be able to go out and say, okay, yes, I'm interested in doing this. Let's find out what it is. And, I want to help people with my knowledge, which I think is a wonderful thing.
Duncan, I think the phrase I remember from everything you just said is when the agency must say it's legal and acceptable. And I think we have pretty good attorneys at NTEU. I don't think we agree to things that are not legal. Real issue is, will this be acceptable to the agency? I would think there's nothing but positive in there for the agency. I would hope that the agency, and I would include all the way up to Treasury, would see the benefit of this program.
Well, having been involved in a lot of these negotiations over the years, I can tell you that they've come up with some pretty interesting legal arguments that I have no idea where they're coming from, but they're saying, no, we can't do this because it's not legal. Show me the code. Show me the code of federal regulations, because I don't see where you're coming from. So that can happen as well. They just want to make sure that when we come to an agreement, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, everything is done right, and so we can move forward with this. But yeah, this is a program that would benefit everyone, IRS as a whole, management, employees. It's a win-win-win.
So we're waiting for that approval, and we'll keep you posted on how that goes. They have what, I think it's the 30-day period they have to review this. Tell
Yep.
me if I'm wrong. Okay, that's what I remember. And also what I remember, just to kind of dovetail what you said, I can remember getting a national agreement, sending it up to Treasury, and there would be a provision that has passed that review 3 or 4 times in the past, and all of a sudden the Treasury lawyers, maybe a different set of them, say it's illegal when 3 sets of them before said it was. So
Yep.
you're right. You just never know what's going to come up. Just several weeks ago, we had couple of people talked to us from United Benefits. United Benefits has a contract with NTEU for our members. They give advice. They offer products if you would choose to accept them. You don't have to, but it's offered. You have recently taken advantage of United Benefits, so tell us about your experience.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I've talked to the folks from United Benefits for years. We advertise it on our Facebook page, things of that nature. As I'm getting to be more seasoned, I'm like, okay, well, let me see what types of things that they offer. And I think any member, whether you're new or whether you're very seasoned, as I like to call myself, there are products that they have that can benefit you, anywhere from life insurance that doesn't require physical exams. If you miss out on a FEGLI period, the Federal Employee Government Life Insurance Program, they have those up to a certain dollar amount that don't require physical exams. They have, if you're interested in turning your TSP into an annuity once you retire, they have those types of situations, which have some interesting aspects to them that don't just mean once you pass, the annuity goes away. They have different things along with that. But I mean, everything from hospital stays to critical care to accident insurance. They have a whole bunch of products, and a lot of the costs of those are fairly decent. So, I'm still in the process of, talking with my wonderful wife, Kim, because we are a partnership. She's the beauty and the brains of the operation. I'm the comedy relief. That, see what works for us, what we need, what we, want, what's cost effective for us. So I would urge everybody to take a look at, it's on the NTU webpage, or if you search United Benefits, they can have somebody contact you, reach out, and talk to you about some of the things that they offer. I'm not getting dime one for talking about this. I just want to, anytime I talk about stuff like this, I just want to help members out there, folks who are listening, to say, this is another thing that NTU, in partnership with United Benefits, offers, that it's worth taking a look at. That's something that might benefit you, that might help you and your family. Anything you can get like that, I think, is a wonderful thing, and it's worth talking to them. It doesn't cost a thing to talk to them.
Well, Duncan, you said that your wife is the beauty and the brains, and you're the comic relief. My wife's the beauty and the brains. So whether I provide comic relief is a matter of conjecture. I'm not so sure I do that. I'm not sure what I do. I just kind of say yes, ma'am. Something that has been an issue with the federal government ever since I entered federal workforce in 1983, and my father was a civil servant, most of his adult life before he retired. And there's always been discussion about what do we do with the federal employee hiring process. It's always been lengthy. It's always been difficult. It takes time. And the argument lately, with the way our society is and the way we move much faster today with technology and everything that we have had in the past, is that we miss out as a government and a lot of really good employees because our hiring process is just not what it should be. I know you have a little something you'd like to say about that today.
Yeah, I sure will. First off, I will give credit to the IRS. They know that it sucks. And I'm just going to be real honest and say it. Our hiring process sucks. Part of that is, the site that we're under, USA Jobs, it constrains, because sometimes, I heard another one today where somebody said, well, I'd love to hire for these jobs, but I haven't gotten any certs. I haven't gotten any applicants. And an employee said, well, no, here are some applicants who've applied. And the hiring official said, those have never gotten to me. So you have situations like that. Then you have the situation I talked to just recently, a gentleman who just joined us from IT, very qualified in his specialty. And I asked him, I said, how's the hiring process? And he just sort of looked at me. And I said, no, I want to hear it. From the time that he applied And this is a job that's very much in demand. IT is very much in demand. From the time that he applied, before he got a tentative job offer, not a firm job offer, a tentative job offer, was about 10 and a half months. That's ridiculous. There's no excuse for that whatsoever. It took him about another month after that to get the firm job offer that he applied to, and I hope he has a great career here with the IRS. But I mean, when you're talking about that long of a process from start to finish, we absolutely can't have that. And that was one of the keys on the 22 national agreement negotiations. Management wanted a hiring process that would be quicker, that would be able to be more nimble, and that would be able to, bring more people on. And so far, they just haven't hit on that. I know for a fact that there's at least one good person working on this, and I hope that they let that person do what they need to do to try and fix this, because it definitely needs some help, because we need more people coming into the service, and we need them hired quicker and done the right way. And what we have now just is not cutting it.
And Duncan, it should be mentioned here, you served on this bargaining team, and you mentioned this many times when you were on that bargaining team, that it was very clear to you toward the end that this is what the management wanted. They wanted a better, quicker, more efficient system to hire. And how should I put this? I think that's an issue that NTEU is not against. NTEU is okay with that, as long as, and these are the big thing, the merit system principles are respected. And on top of that, that all the civil service basic rules are also followed. So, we don't get into people hiring their friends and relatives and that kind of thing, which is not the way the merit system is supposed to work. And I think from what I recall, Duncan, you felt that you had come up with a very good set of solutions, yet as they are being rolled out in practice, you just don't seem to, I wouldn't say you, but the agency has not found a way to actually make that efficient system become real.
One of the problems that I found with the senior management at IRS, to be honest, is we have too many folks who've been saying, "Well, we don't do it that way. We've been here this long and we just don't do it that way. We like the way we do it." Well, the way you do it doesn't work. You need to look outside the box. And I'm famous for being in negotiations or, making suggestions to anyone from the commissioner on down to say, we need to, I'll come out with a suggestion out of left field, because we need to think outside the box, because what we're doing and what we've been doing hasn't worked well enough. Our hiring takes too long. Our retention is not good enough. And we need to solve these things by improving the hiring process from the start. So I know they're good people working on this, and I hope they can come up with a better solution sooner rather than later.
And I want to make it clear, and you said this before, NTEU wants to be part of the solution, and we're willing
Absolutely.
to do that. I want to tell you a quick story. I spent 4 years as a news reporter, morning news anchor, and I covered stories during the day for a radio station in Columbus, Indiana. And one of the people I got to know was the man who did the emergency management. He was running the emergency management system for the county. It was not a full-time job, it was a part-time job. His full-time job was a jet pilot for the executives at Cummins Engine Company. One of the major reasons there's an airport in Columbus, Indiana, with a long landing strip is because Cummins Engine has at least one, maybe more jet aircraft. And, Cummins is an international company. An executive or set of executives may need to fly off to India or China, who knows where, on a moment's notice. So they do need to have those jets for a very clear and important business reason. But there's another side to that. Corporate executives and owners and so forth, CEOs, who take that jet that they use for business and use it for personal travel. When that happens, that creates something, I don't know, we call it taxable income. And this is something that IRS, of course, has a great interest in. Having been a tax law specialist, I know there are just incredibly complex calculations you have to make to figure out how something like a corporate jet used for personal purposes is supposed to be valued. How do you come up with the taxable income amount? That's not easy. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but IRS has announced that the agency is going to go after the big corporate jets used for personal purposes. I think that's a good thing. I think it adds credibility to the agency.
Absolutely, it does. That's one of the purposes when the IRA was passed that we said, you give us the tools, we'll be able to go after these higher earnings and the loopholes out there. And, some folks in Congress are saying, well, you're just going to go after the smaller taxpayers. And there was a commitment. No, it'll be over folks making more than $400,000 a year. And this is one of those things that's on there because I don't know many folks that are making less than $400,000 a year that have a private corporate jet. It may just be me, but there may be some out there I'm not aware of. But I mean, those are the types of things that we need to take a look at to make sure that the tax system is applied fairly and correctly. And that's one of the main core values of the service. We need to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share taxes and it's being done correctly. And this is part of that's been let go for too long. But because of the fact we're able to hire more people, we're able to hire people that are specializing in things like this and are able to train them to look for things like this that'll make the service better, that'll bring in more money to reduce the deficit and prove that the IRS, as we've said for decades, if you invest in the IRS, you're going to reduce the deficit, you're going to increase the money coming in because we're going to get the taxes that are fairly owed. Not going and picking on somebody, but taking care of the money and collecting the money that should be in the government coffers.
Well, now, wait a minute. So you mean that the NTU chapter presidents don't have their own personal jets?
I do have a personal jet. It's about yay long. It's called a paper airplane. It doesn't get me very far.
Okay,
that's about as close to a private jet I come with.
Just fly the thing across the room. Yeah, that's about as far as you can go. Okay, Duncan, time for your final comment.
Yeah, my final comment today is something very special that happened 44 years ago yesterday. It's called The Miracle on the Ice. And this was the story of the United States hockey team beating the Soviet Union hockey team in the Olympics. This is a team nobody gave a shot to. Nobody said we'd be able to do anything. We got beat by that very same team by a score of 10-0 a month previous to that in an exhibition game. And this, folks that don't know, we were going through something called the Iran hostage crisis at the time. There was a lot of, malaise in the country, and this truly brought everybody together. I mean, the entire country was brought together by this, and it's one of the things, the events I'll always remember watching that game on TV and just absolutely blowing my mind. And that's what I think the American people can do, whether you're a family of two, a great big family, a workplace, whatever. If we have a common cause and we can pull ourselves together, folks in America can do anything. And that's an incredibly important and special thing, because you can't say that about a lot of countries, but in America, we can do this if we pull together. And things like, passing a budget, we can do this if we pull together. So I just urge everybody out there, strengthen your bonds with your spouse, your family, children, whoever it may be, because you can do stuff together.
Yeah, what I remember most about that game was the coach talking to that team right before the game. And he just gave this rousing speech. And he said, we played this team 10 times, they'll beat us 9 out of 10, but they're not going to beat us tonight. And what a message that was. My final comment is this. Sometimes, Duncan, you have very dangerous work when you work for the federal government. And this is not something I always consider as dangerous work. Did you realize that President Biden and his family had a dog that bit Secret Service agents 25 times? 25 times. Well, during the time that he had, I think the Secret Service and quite frankly, everybody said, as much as you may love this dog has got to go. So, I mean, let's face it, Secret Service work is dangerous enough. Yeah, Secret
Exactly.
Service used to be part of IRS, used to be part of Treasury. So we had kind of a connection with them. But then when government was reorganized after 9/11, they became part of the Department of Homeland Security. But yeah, 25 bites. There's an old saying. I took a course in tort law years ago where they said every dog is entitled to one bite, but the dog is not entitled to 25 bites. So that is my final comment. Duncan, thank you so much. And thank you for watching and listening to the Chapter 49 podcast. We're very happy that you chose to spend a little of your time with us today. I know that just listening, watching to the very end can sometimes be a bit of a chore, but we're happy that you did that. And if you like this podcast, let other people know. If you think other IRS or federal employees would like to hear this conversation Duncan and I have mostly weekly, please let other people know. Share the link. You can always get an update from Duncan Giles if you simply send him an email at nteu49 at AOL.com, NTU49 at AOL.com. He can send a link to you every week. We have this. But in the meantime, again, thanks for watching and listening. Be safe and be kind.